Hello and welcome to Queendom TV, and today guys I'm going to be talking about why I believe that Britney Spears comes from a narcissistic family. Now before we get into this, I just want to give a quick disclaimer to say that the reason why I want to speak about this is because I feel, as a woman of faith, I really feel that narcissism is something that is so much more prevalent in society today than we realize. I believe a lot of people are actually victims of narcissists, and because of the nature of how narcissism works, you could be with a narcissist, and as long as they've managed to convince you to be in their fake reality, you will never realize that they are the reason that you are suffering. You'll never realize that they are the reason why you seem to be trying so hard and your life is never really working out the way that you want it to. You've got really bad mental health issues. Maybe you've got really low self-esteem. So I think it's important for us to actually shed a lot more light to this subject area. And so I'm not a medical professional in this area. I'm not a psychiatrist, a psychologist. I do have a degree in chemistry and science. I'm familiar with the sciences. And also I am somebody who just loves people. I'm also a woman of faith, as I said. And so don't look to me to be the expert, but as the experts even themselves say, there's a difference between narcissism and narcissistic personality disorder. Narcissistic personality disorder is where somebody is actually diagnosed and goes through, all the relevant examinations to actually have that diagnosis, whereas narcissism, and just talking about it as narcissism, is something that any of us can do. Any of us can comment on narcissism, because there's certain character traits that constitute a narcissist, and that's even where a lot of the professionals talk from, is they explain how you can understand what the characteristics of a narcissistic person is like. Doesn't mean that they are diagnosing or saying you or I can diagnose them as having narcissistic personality disorder. So I hope that clears everything up. But without further ado, let's get into it. Now, the reason why I want to talk about this, is particularly to do with Britney Spears, is because I feel as though with Britney, she has been through a lot, right? And she represents what I understand to be the favorite prey of the narcissist, which is an empathetic person that has a lot to give, right? Because narcissistic relationships, they work in one direction. It's all about the narcissist getting, and anything that they give, it's just to get what they ultimately want. Just to start off with, and I think a lot of people manipulated Britney Spears in that way, particularly Lou M. Taylor. I did a video talking about that, and how Britney came out on her Instagram recently saying how, Lou and Robin tried to seem like they just wanted to help her, blah, blah, blah. They use the technique that they talk about in narcissism called love bombing, which is what narcissists do a lot of the time. They make you feel loved, they make you feel valued, they make you feel special, they reel you in. And so by the time that you're in the trap now of being with a narcissistic person in any way, you're so busy thinking about that thing that you once had with that person, or the fact that the words that they said in the beginning, that you could go on for years completely ignoring the fact that they're not actually doing what they said that they were going to be, they're not actually doing what they said they were going to do. And they're actually taking from you, taking advantage. And a lot of the times, by the time you are deep into that relationship, you are so many people are in that reality, and you in their fake reality, and that it's hard for you to even break out of it now, because it's like, who's going to believe your story? And that's kind of what I feel like happened with Britney Spears. I kind of feel like, her family and other people and other narcissistic individuals in Hollywood took advantage of her in the beginning, especially in terms of like, and now I'm going to kind of break down the family, at least from what I've understood, because she has two siblings, her brother Brian and her sister Jamie Lynn. And this is how I personally feel this all went down, right? I feel like you've got Britney, who for me was the scapegoat, right, of the narcissistic family. And this is something that you always see. It's usually the person who can see into what is happening with the family very quickly early on. And so because the family wants to maintain this fake reality of that they need to kind of uphold as part of being narcissistic, that person is the one who's on the chopping block. So whenever anything goes wrong, they're always the one to blame, because somehow it's their fault, that things went downhill, and the blame never goes to the actual narcissist themselves. Obviously, that's an absolutely genius method for them to use. And I feel like Jamie Lynn was the golden child, because if you think about it with Jamie Lynn, it's interesting to me how she, first of all, I believe is like 12 years younger than Britney Spears. So to me, it's like, by this point, Britney's parents, who are called Jamie and Lynn, again giving me another reason why I feel like Jamie Lynn is the golden child. They already had their opportunity because Britney was already successful by this point. Like Jamie Lynn herself has said that once Britney came along, she was already once she came along, Britney was already successful because Britney was successful as a child. So I feel like the parents already had, and I'm not sure who I believe is, if I believe both of Britney's parents are narcissists or if it's just James. I definitely believe James is. I'm not sure about Lynn, but Lynn, she could be this codependent thing, which we'll talk about that maybe in a minute. But so I feel like with Jamie Lynn, she came along, she was the one that was easier for them to mold, you know. She's the one where they had the other son, Brian, being like the, what you call it, the director, or I think he was like, he was a producer or executive producer on Zoe 101. You know, she was supposed to be like the perfect one, etc., etc. And then because they had her, and she was probably feeding into all this family stuff, backing up everything that they're trying to put onto Britney and stuff as time is going on. She's the golden child, and that's usually what happens with golden children from what I've seen, that it's always a case of like they end up being really good with the parents, even though the scapegoat isn't really good, and it kind of puts the siblings against each other because the golden child is happy to be, you know, going along with the parents, and the parents like the golden child because the golden child makes them look good. But then the thing is, also with Britney being the scapegoat, which is kind of a sad thing, is that I feel like initially she was somewhat of a golden child, probably, which is how it usually happens when you make the parents look good. But then maybe when you want to go off from what they wanted you to actually do, and you start to see through who they really are or whatever, then you become the scapegoat because they have to protect, you know, what they're trying to do. And I do believe that a lot of narcissistic behaviors and people are jealous and hateful individuals as well, because one thing that I've heard from all the experts about narcissists is that really deep down they hate themselves. And so I think, you know, I think that really triggers them to see somebody that's doing well, to see somebody that's happy, to see somebody that's positive. But that's also why they want to use those types of people to be like a source for them, for their, you know, reality, for their fake reality. And so we got Jamie Lynn, who I believe is the golden child, although she had that blip with the whole baby situation. I feel like that potentially could have been a time where Jamie Lynn could have broken out, but she clearly chose not to. And I believe that because to this day, till now, obviously we've seen everything that's gone down. You guys have seen the videos I've made just with showing how Jamie Lynn has been completely against Britney, also gaslighting her. Like there's been a lot of gaslighting of Britney, because this is what narcissists do, is when you try to like explain what's gone on. And I'll just say this from now, that I have experience with narcissists. I have very high, when I hear the description of how narcissists are, it made me realize I have experienced many narcissists before myself, and it's all the same. And this is why it's a very spiritual thing, guys. Like I must say this, what I realized, right, is with certain behavior types, you'll see that like there is a, you'll notice that there are things that always happen with a particular type of person. And I noticed this when it came to stuff like cheating, that somebody that cheats, there'll always be certain things that you'll hear of, and so many different stories they'll have the same thing. Like maybe it's that they would that loads of people who've been cheated on will say, my partner came home and goes straight into the shower. That's something you'll hear frequently from people who've had a spouse or somebody who cheats. Or they'll say that we always argued because I felt like something was wrong, and they were saying that that I don't trust them, and that maybe it's because blah blah blah, you know. All these things, there'll be all these different things that they do. Or they'll notice that, why is my spouse always saying they're going to meet the guys, but you know they come back and they smell like whatever, you know, whatever the thing is. I noticed that with whatever different type of these negative kind of personality characteristic type things that people do, you can notice trends amongst vast numbers of stories. And it's like, why is it so similar if these are all completely different people, completely different ethnicities, completely different cultures? I'll tell you why, guys, because this is a spiritual thing, as it always is. You know, this is a spiritual thing, and these are real evil spirits, real demonic spirits that show themselves in the same way. They always act the same way. Like, you know, even the Bible says there's nothing new under the sun. Nothing that's happening today isn't anything that's never happened before, right? The only things that are changing is that maybe we have technology, but the way that we're using technology and the way that the world is functioning, it's all the same. You know, it's just that all those same things that happen are being now done through the new technologies that we now have and stuff like that, right? And so when we're talking even about narcissism and stuff like that, I realized that, and I'm going to talk in my other channel on Kings and Queens, feel free to check that out, links in the description box. I'm going to talk about the demonic like makeup of a narcissist, because I feel like this goes very deep, and it does. That's why you find that with so many of these different people who have experienced, you know, narcissists in their family, or just narcissists in general, you hear the same exact thing, and it's very demonic. Because to lie so much, let's not forget this, right? I just talked about gaslighting, right? And go and find a definition, because I can't think of a good definition to give you right now, and it's not my English is not my expertise, okay? I've said this before, and that's okay, right? But a lot of what narcissists do is lying through their teeth. A lot of them are pathological liars. Well, they are pathological liars, and they lie so strongly and so violently that you believe what they're saying. You know, I was watching one guy was talking about it. One man who has experience of narcissism and stuff like that. He was talking about how he was talking to a girl who had been telling him, who had basically contracted, you know, an STI from her boyfriend. The boyfriend, or her, I don't know if he was a boyfriend at the time, but they were on some kind of on and off situation. And so she got it from him. She knew for a fact that she'd only slept with him, but she also knew that he was probably sleeping with other people. So then when she caught something through him and she tried to pull him up on it, he was like, well, this has to have been you. You must have done it. And she was saying how she could she was starting to be convinced by this guy that, like, yes, I actually did this myself, when in reality she didn't do it. And that's why I say this stuff is demonic, because words cast spells and cast curses. The more that somebody is speaking to you from that demonic place of narcissism, saying to you, no, that never happened, because this is what you hear from narcissists as well. Something will happen, they'll say it never happened. You see that with people who've been through like molestation, rape and stuff like that, where the person won't want to admit to what they've done. And also, let's not forget, narcissists make up great personality for people who molest and do horrible stuff like that, because then all they're going to do is they're going to bank on the fact that you don't believe it, that you're going to believe the story that they're telling you. Or if you don't believe that, everybody else isn't going to listen to you, because they're going to convince everybody else. And that's one thing that narcissists are extremely good at. That's one of the reasons why they need money. Circling back to Britney. And so with her family, I really feel like this is where so much of the issues Britney faced actually came from. Because how is anybody going to believe what she's saying when these people have conjured up all these different ways where they're affecting what we believe to be reality, whether that's James being besties with TMZ, which we all know is not or at least in my opinion, and I've talked about this in other videos, TMZ are not the friend of people in not the people in Hollywood, but certainly the friend of people in Hollywood who want to just spin stories and create, you know, fake realities and just have drama and tea and destruction and everything like that, right? So we know that he was doing that. He was capitalizing off of that. Everybody in the rest of the world was now under this spell, believing that, oh, Britney needed to be in this conservatorship. Fast forward, people didn't even think into the dementia claims, which I talked about the dementia things in another video, so you guys can check that out. Like, now we're realizing that, oh, wait a minute, that actually doesn't make any sense. A lot of this didn't make any sense. You know why a lot of things are hitting us now? Because we've all been under this narcissistic spell, if you will, of this fake reality with that was trying to be portrayed to us. And who's the victim of all of this? It's always the empathetic person that has everything to give and has a good heart and just wants to do what they want to do, which is in this case is Britney Spears. And so let's not forget about her brother Brian, right? So Brian, I believe, comes into under the title of the invisible child. Now Brian is the one who was very heavily involved in the family business, and I think that for him, one characteristic I discovered about the invisible children is that usually they're trying to do a lot to get attention. And the reason, and it's funny because I could almost see Brian and Jamie Lynn kind of having a similar role in both kind of being invisible, but both kind of being the golden child. However, I feel that Jamie Lynn got that more because let's not forget, Brian is the oldest. So then Britney comes along. Britney's the one who's now helping the family and whatnot. So I think that's where he started to become invisible while she was in her golden child stage before she became the scapegoat, when they realized that we can make so much more money off of her. We have so much more to gain from just exploiting her than treating her the way that she deserves to be treated and loving her. And then as she now starts to become the scapegoat, probably because she's not working along with just being exploited, Jamie Lynn comes along and she's kind of like, let's try and just brainwash her from the very beginning so that she's not ever wanting to break out and like do things for herself like her sister, because that's what happens a lot with golden children, is that when they get to adulthood or as they get older, a lot of them, when they start to move away from the family and the family can no longer control them, because let's not forget, narcissism is a lot about control. And what did I tell you guys about manipulation and control? I told you that that is witchcraft in and of itself on the most basic level. Trying to manipulate and control somebody against their will or whatever, that is witchcraft, right? And so and you guys, if you want to understand more about that, definitely go and check my I think I did is Witchcraft 101 was the live that I did, and I was talking about stuff like this, so definitely check that out so you can understand more of this stuff to do with how all that stuff works. So now Jamie Lynn's come along, but not only is she Jamie, she's called Jamie Lynn, so it's like, to me that's a signal like this is going to be the child that we can groom. And this is where it's interesting to start discussing Lynn, because Lynn for me is one of those people where I definitely feel that James himself is a narcissist. I think that's why he cannot acknowledge the truth. That's one thing I've learned from all the experts, is they say that, you know, the narcissist is not worth talking to, because they're not going to acknowledge the truth. They're not going to acknowledge who they are and what they're doing ever. So the best thing to do is to get away from them, because they are going to maintain what they are doing, which is why I feel like with James, he does things, he never really addresses what he's doing. He just does whatever he can get away with and tries to continue, you know, what he's doing. And what happens a lot of the time with narcissistic families is you end up having a codependent. If you've got one parent that's narcissistic, you have another parent that's codependent, and that parent might try to do things to gain, you know, to try and make up for the other parent and to try and do this. Now we know already, as I talked about in one of my previous videos, that there are rumors and thoughts of what James and Lou M. Taylor could be doing. So James and Lou probably at the beginning were looking at each other more with interest for each other, because they're like, hey, you want to exploit people, I want to exploit people. I feel like Lynn was not as interested in it, but I think ultimately she never really did what she needed to do. And there's a whole bunch of dodgy things surrounding Lynn anyway. So again, the point of it all is that Britney is left there. Brian, I believe, eventually became the invisible child. I believe that he was the one doing all of this stuff for the family, like, because he handled Britney's finances and this and that. I believe, again, he was falling for the fake reality of his parents saying that Britney needs this help with this and that. And really the reason he was so dedicated into it is because he was feeling invisible. He was less important, because even when you hear him talk, like when I've seen, and I did videos about him as well, so check out my whole Free Britney playlist. But like, even when you see like videos by him, when you see him talking, to me, I feel a sense of like resentment towards her, almost as if like, well, we gave everything to you and everything became about you, and this is how you're gonna like do this. We were doing this all for your career. And this is another thing that narcissists do in narcissistic families, is that the person who is when the person wants to break out of that, they will instantly, this is part of being a scapegoat, is like they make you look bad, they make you feel guilty, because the one way they keep you in, right, is through guilt, because you're like, how can I leave these people? Because maybe it's because they brought you up, they fed you, they put food on your back, on your plate, and clothes on your back. And this is something I'm going to be talking about more, and I might talk about this whole parenting and the job description of parenting, right? And why I'm really sick and tired, not to be rude, but I really am sick and tired of a lot of people expecting people to ignore, you know, a lot of trauma that people went through just because they got food and they had clothes on their back and they had a roof. Because you know something, those children didn't ask to be here. No, none of us asked to be here. If you have a child, that is your expectation. That's a part of your job description, right? You don't, when you go to a supermarket, right? When you go to a supermarket, or you're going to be served by somebody, right? It's not that you don't say thank you to them. They make an effort to serve you, but ultimately that's their job. They might not be doing that if they weren't getting paid for it, right? So it's not for, I just don't like this idea that just because somebody did what they were supposed to do, now we have to ignore extremely high level problematic behaviors that they did. Does that make sense? I feel like the supermarket thing didn't really make sense the way I explained it this time. So just ignore what I said about that. But you guys catch my drift. And by no means am I saying to not be grateful. I say this, honestly, guys, I say this because usually people who are breaking out of these situations have been so overly grateful to people that are actually taking advantage of them and actually don't care about them. And they're only saying those things like, I did this for you and I did that for you, because a part of doing that is for the fake reality. Because as I discovered, you know, and I was researching this because I couldn't get my head around it. My brain didn't want to accept the truths of a narcissist, right? And a lot of people have been saying narcissists, they don't love anybody. They're selfish. They only care about themselves. They don't love their children. In fact, one woman that I saw said, one expert that I saw was saying that narcissists would actually be happy for their children to die. I think this is why a lot of people who've suffered narcissistic abuse end up with suicidal ideation, right? And again, this is all demonic in my opinion. Why? Because ultimately that's what the parent would want. Why? Because if you are going to be breaking out, if you're the scapegoat, right, and you're going to be making them look bad, they don't want something to threaten that whole vision, that whole image, that whole reality, fake reality. So if you're dead, guess what? They get to have everybody feeling sorry for them, which feeds into their narcissism, which gives them fuel. Whenever people bring it up, it's another opportunity for them to get people to feel sorry for them, to get people to do things for them without having to actually deal with you. So actually, to a narcissist, you're better off dead than you are alive. And especially because guess what else now? Now they're in full control of the narrative. You're not there to defend yourself. You're not there to explain anything. And I think that's actually why Britney Spears herself even said, these people wanted to kill me. I should have died. You know, I should have died, because that would have benefited them more. They could have been like, we're going to do a memorial for Britney. We want to do this. We want to do blah, blah, blah. It kind of reminds me of Madeleine McCann, for any of you guys who know about Madeleine McCann. But Madeleine McCann was a little girl who died or who went missing years ago. This is a big story in the UK, which also there's connections of Liam Taylor to this Madeleine McCann story. And the parents were getting so much attention. They were doing book deals, this and that, and a lot of people were really uncomfortable with it. But guess what? Unless we have Madeleine to tell the story, unless Madeleine one day comes out of nowhere, I hope she's alive. I'm not even going to say what it seems like is the situation. I hope she's alive, but unless she is, we're never going to know what really happens. And as long as we never really know, they're always going to have that doubt. That as long as they have that little seed of doubt, they can get all the sympathy that they ever want. And think about it, they are so much better off with her dead than they are with her alive, as far as the public is concerned, because now they're getting people buying their books. Now when they want to do anything, they've got so much attention, they've got the media's attention, they're getting paid for all this stuff. So, and I know this sounds crazy, I know people are thinking it's not that simple, but let me tell you something. I say this, I've said this many times, and I'll say this again, right? We need to stop assuming that people are good people. It doesn't exist like that. It doesn't work like that. People are not just good for the sake of it. Most people will do what they can get away with. Usually the people that are good in any type of way, I believe every good and perfect gift comes from the Lord. I think everything that's good, it comes from God. It comes from the fact that when you decide to make good decisions, you know, then God is going to back you up. That's what I believe is really what karma is. People call it karma or whatever. But I think a lot of people who are good or whatever, it's because of things that they've seen, and they've actually been moved with compassion, either from what they've been through or from what they see other people going through. And rather than letting the kingdom of darkness take over them and becoming a narcissist or becoming abusive or becoming whatever, instead they let the kingdom of light take over, and they say, you know what, I want to help the world. I want to do something good. You know, I want to be supportive of people out there. I want to be a part of the solution, kind of thing. So that's why I really believe that Britney's family are narcissists till now. I think, you know, our narcissists are very obsessed with themselves, very vain. I kind of feel that with Jamie Lynn, you know, the way that she was trying to just push through this Zoe 101 reboot when clearly people weren't interested. Clearly she wasn't very nice on set. The way that she was dealing with Britney, you know, again, this is because the thing with narcissism is usually you're when you come from a narcissistic family, you're also at the risk of becoming a narcissist, right? And I think that's kind of where Jamie Lynn is kind of finding herself at, you know, or alternatively you become the very opposite, which is I think where Britney was. And I think as time was going on, Britney was becoming less and less like her parents and her family, and less like, you know, Holly Weird. And then that in turn eventually became the very problem, kind of thing. So anyways, like I said, guys, these are just my opinions based on the research that I've been doing, but I think it's helpful for us to talk about because this is really important. I really feel like it's important to discuss this for people to get true understanding and to be broken out of these types of situations. So yeah, you guys let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Let me know if there's any other people that you want me to talk about in this subject area. If you like the idea of me talking about this narcissism and stuff, if you think there's people we should talk about, what your experience is are with this stuff. I would love to hear those things in the comment section down below. Don't forget to subscribe, of course. I really appreciate that. You guys know that already. And like the video. Other than that, God bless you all, and I'll see you in my next one. Goodbye.